Well, hello, everybody. I think we'll get started. Welcome to Trowel Talk Live. My name is Julianne Labreche, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. The daylilies are in bloom right now, and so there's no better time than now to talk about hybridizing daylilies. And what better master gardener to share her ideas on this topic than Kelly Noel. Kelly has been a master gardener for over 18 years now, and a very active one. She had a large garden full of daylilies, and she's developed an expertise in hybridizing them. We're really fortunate to have her with us today. And before we get started, I'd just like to remind you too that if you have any questions for Kelly, just leave them in the chat room. Marianne Van Berlo will be keeping track of your questions today, and Kelly will try to answer them at the end of her talk. So now, without any further delay, over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Julianne. But I have to say I'm not an expert, but I am certainly interested in doing hybridizing with daylilies. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, making, daylily babies in the backyard. Now, the first thing though I want to do is make sure that we're all talking about the same plant. In this picture, you see 4 lilies, the yellow ones, and 1 daylily. The blossoms look very similar, but you can see that their foliage is quite different. The true lily from the genus Lilium, the flower stalk has leaves coming out all the way up, whereas the daylily has leaves coming from the base in a sort of a fountain. Their blossoms do look alike, but they are not the same plant. And the daylily is the genus Hemerocallis. Now, in this genus, there are about 20 species, and here are 6 of them. And you can see that they look quite a bit alike, slightly different colors, but very simple plants. And even if I had pictures of the other 14, you would not see great differences in these. There's differences in color, and some are short and some are tall, and some are fragrant and some aren't. Some, like the one down here in the corner, our famous ditch lily, is practically sterile. It very rarely produces any seeds, and it has an underground stolon that runs along and makes it pop up over here and over here. And one of the reasons why it has a bit of a bad reputation. Some of the other species don't have that feature at all, which is kind of a good thing. Now, starting in the 1800s, late 1800s for sure, botanists began to cross these daylilies, one species with another, and they found great variation and made it very interesting to do it. And now there are all colors. These are the 5 groups of colors they usually talk about: pinks, purples, melons, yellows, and the red ones. And everybody, all the ones who do this hybridizing on a very serious level are looking for pure white and true blue. There are lots of daylilies that are quite white, but as soon as you put them beside something that really is white, you can tell, oh yeah, that one's a little yellow, that one's a little pink. And so they're still looking for one that is truly, truly white. And when they have one that they think looks blue, put it by something that's really blue, and you can see that actually it's lavender or it isn't quite blue. But that's what they're looking for. Now, I want to use some words, and I want to make sure we understand what these words mean. Now, a seedling is just a plant that's grown from a seed. And this is sexual reproduction. It gets in characteristics from both parents. Now, in the case with daylilies and a lot of other plants too, if the parents are from the same species, they look alike anyway. They maybe have minor variations. And the progeny from this, when you cross 2 from the same species, are going to look like the parents, and they'll look like each other. Little variations. What we say here is that these come true from seed. And so a species is a stable breeding population. If you cross between two species, this is what we call a hybrid. Now, usually, well, in the case of daylilies, they're in the same genus, but they are not the same species. And these can be very different from the parents, and they're different from their siblings as well. That's one of the things that the early hybridizers realized quickly, that when they had seeds from that were from a cross, that these definitely were different species because the results were so different. Now, a Daylily Cultivar, all this is a seedling, a hybrid seedling that has been registered by the person who grew the, created the seed and grew the plant, and they registered it with the American Hemerocallis Society. They've given it a name, and usually then it is at some point introduced into commerce and you can buy it. But not all of them are. And at this point, I checked yesterday, and there are 94,565 registered cultivars as of yesterday. And I bet if I checked today, it would be a couple more. Now I have to make those babies in the backyard. First, we have to have a little sex education. This is the female part. It's called a pistil. There's one of them. The top is the stigma, the stem of it is the style, and at the bottom is the ovary, which I'll show you in a minute. The male parts are the anthers. Oh, sorry, the stamens. There are 6 of them in a daylily, and the anther is the part that has the pollen, and the filament is the little stem that it's on. And as is quite typical in a lot of plants, the female part is well up above these pollen-bearing structures, so that the pollen can't fall on it, and it makes it difficult to pollinate itself. Although daylilies can be self-pollinated, it's not easy for it to happen in nature. So this is where the ovary is, down at the bottom, and that actually is a structure. The stigma, style, and the ovary is one structure. And there are these little things, are ovules, and there are many. I don't know whether, I couldn't find a place where it said specifically how many. There's more in some daylilies than in others. This is the close-up of the stigma, and it is hairy and it is sticky. Now, the stickiness develops, and I think it develops fairly early in the morning or soon after the daylily opens, and it's ready to receive pollen. And often the anthers are not ready at that point. Here's one, and at this point the anthers, this was taken early in the morning at 8 o'clock. Now the daylily had probably been open for an hour at this point, and you can already see there's lots of pollen there. But here's another one taken early in the morning, and these anthers, there's nothing there at this point. And a little later, you can see that this is a couple of hours later, a skim of pollen has developed on those. So you have to wait until there's pollen on the anthers. I know one hybridizer who goes out on a day and collects blossoms when he sees a blossom that he wants. And the anthers are all fluffy with pollen. He picks off that blossom, the whole thing, and he puts it on a tray, and he ends up with a tray full of blossoms that he then takes and puts in the refrigerator. And then the next day he takes those blossoms and he gets at the stigma when it's early in the morning, before the pollen has developed necessarily, and he uses yesterday's pollen on those daylilies. Now, it's entirely possible that the bees might beat you to it, but if you're an early bird, maybe you'll get to do the job. Now, when you decide to do the hybridizing, you have to have 2 parents. One parent will be the mother, and that will be the one that carries the pod, and one other parent will be the father, the pollen parent. And you have to decide what are you looking for? Do you want to cross different colors? Do you want taller and shorter? Whatever you want. Now, for me, most of the time, it was convenience. If they were blooming on the same day, I hybridized with those. I did not save pollen, although you can. You can save pollen for a couple of hours just without doing anything special to it. You can save it till the next day, maybe a couple of days in the refrigerator. You can actually freeze it. And I don't know whether that's indefinite, but you can freeze it. Now I mentioned here chromosomes, dips and tets. If you do any work with daylilies, you'll notice on the nursery listings that they refer to either a diploid or a dip, as we call it, or a tetraploid or a tet. And that has to do with the number of chromosomes. The natural order is diploid, 2 sets of chromosomes, 1 from each parent. But somewhere in the maybe 1930, 40 area, some hybridizers discovered that if you treated a plant with some chemicals, that you could actually create pollen and eggs that had already 2 sets of chromosomes each. So when they merged, you had 4 sets, or a tetraploid. And these actually still look like daylilies. Now, lots of times if you mess with chromosomes of a creature, what you get is something that's not viable or a monstrosity or whatever. But that's not true of tetraploid daylilies for sure. And the daylilies aren't the only plants that can have a tetraploid count. There are daylilies that have 3 sets. They're triploids. They're usually sterile. But anyway, so here's what you do. This is what I did. You take matters into your own hands. You pick the father and you pull a stamen off when it's nice and fluffy with pollen. And then you go to the mother and you rub that pollen over the stigma. You have here hundreds of pollen grains, way more than you could possibly need. But that's what happens when you do that. You can't just drop 2 or 3 or 10 on the top of the stigma. Now, at this point, the most incredible thing starts having, one of those magical things that nature has come up with. And the pollens that are on the sticky surface are activated by that sticky sap and begin to grow a tube that goes down through this stem of the female part, through the style. And the pollen grain actually contains the sperm that will actually end up merging with the egg, but it contains other material too, vegetative material, and that's what's happening. That's what creates this tube that goes down through the style. When it gets into the ovary area, the ovules, the end bursts of this tube and it delivers the sperm, which then hopefully unite with an egg, and you will get a seed. So you can just imagine now, they grow at about, it depends, about 1 centimeter an hour. At least these tubes could be faster. I mean, in a daylily, you got to be pretty fast because this blossom is only going to last a day. It starts to senesce, to get old and wither that evening. So the pollen is on a race to get down there. Now, just imagine this thing probably already has 8, 10, 20 different pollen tubes going down through that style. So every egg that is fertilized by a different pollen grain. So when you open a pod later, you may have a few seeds in, you may have a lot of seeds in. I read of one where he had 32 seeds in one diploid pod, which seems like an incredible number. But anyway, that's what's happening. As soon as you put this pollen on the stigma, these pollen tubes start to race down. Now, I'm a person who keeps records. I write everything down, kept track of who the mother was, who the father was, and I hung a tag on mine. And you can see here, this is when I had just hybridized. And that plant is called ribbon candy. That's its cultivar name. And I used a daylily called Hyperion for the father. And I hung a tag on it. And now, you don't have to know the names of them to do this. It could be the red one by the garage and my neighbor's pink, whatever two daylilies you have crossed. It is fun to keep track, just so that you can later look at what you get and compare it to the father and the mother and compare them to each other. So I did like to know who the parents were. Now, in this one over here, this is probably 2 days. That deadhead is probably bloomed 2 days ago, judging by the condition of it. And you can see that at the base here, you have a pod definitely forming. It's swelling there. So at least some of the pollen grains got down there in time, and there was some fertilization happened. You can take the deadhead off if you're extremely careful the day after you pollinate, but I always left it until I could see that it had been successful, and then I carefully removed it. And on this side, here's a little pod that is forming. It in about 6 to 8 weeks, the pod will split. Now here's one. On this side, I probably did harvest this one at this point when it had split open. You can open it a little further. Actually, I used to just take the whole pod off and with the tag and put it in a little pouch. And, because when I was going crazy doing this, I would have maybe 10, 12 ripe pods on any given day. Here's one on this side. I missed this at the time, but I was lucky that it now was about to split open on its own and just drop those seeds. So I harvested them before that happened, but I had missed it on my Daylily patrol earlier. And here they are. This says Dancing Bales crossed with Russian Easter, and here are those two. The mother is the pink Dancing Bales, and the father was the yellow Russian Easter. And there are the seeds on my palm, and that's what they look like. They're shiny little black, not totally spherical, but they are shiny and they're big enough to handle. That's what they look like. In fact, that's what got me started on this whole thing. One fall, I noticed a pod on a Stella Doro that I had. Now, I was a pretty dedicated deadheader. One of the things I love to do is go out each morning early to see what new daylilies had bloomed today, and I would pinch off yesterday's blossoms, get rid of them. I don't like the look of them. So it was unusual when I saw this little pod, and I thought, oh, well, let me look. I had not seen daylily seeds before, so I took that and I shook it into my hand. And then I realized, okay, now I'm hooked. I mean, you can't look at seeds and then not plant them. You can't just chuck them after you've seen them. So that's what got me started on this. So here's what I would do with my seeds. After you can see there's a pod here that I have emptied out. And I got these little metal cups from the dollar store, 16 for a couple of bucks. And I put a little circle of paper towel in the bottom just to help them dry out a little bit. Dump the seeds in with the tag, and you can see the differing numbers of seeds that I've got in each of these pods. This would be from a single pod. And then I put them with their tag in a little baggie, and I stored these in the fridge, not the freezer, in the fridge. Now, this is not the only way to germinate them and grow them on. There are, if you search this online, you'll find many different ways. This is what I did. In March, I put them in bags of vermiculite, moist vermiculite, and closed the bag to keep the moisture in. And if you look closely, you can see a number here, 213. Every cross that I did, I gave it a number. A scribbler full of records, so I could look to see what the cross was there. And so then I would wait and check them every single day. And here you have 3 have germinated this time. The white is the root, the radical, and this one has some green showing. This is what they actually look like. And they're not all identical, as you can see, but they all have a white root part, and they have a green shoot part showing, and they have the seed, which you can still see where their nourishment is coming from. And the one here in this corner, it has not sprouted any green yet, so I probably popped that one back into the vermiculite to grow on, because you don't know necessarily where the green is going to come from, whether it's going to come up here or come out from here. So these other three were ready to be planted, and that's what I did. I put them in a pot, and with a tag to say what cross they were, what number. And you can see here, these look like tiny little daylilies. This was the year I went sort of nuts, I have to say. But anyway, it was huge fun, I will also say. So here they are later, hardening off. And before this stage, I realized, oh my God, what am I going to do with all of these? I have to plant them. And I had a big garden, but it was pretty full. So I prevailed upon my good husband to help me make this raised bed in the back of the yard. It was 4 by 16. And so I had my seedling bed, and then I planted them. And yes, before you ask, yes, I did make a grid. I was a math teacher, so I made a grid so that I could plant them in each section. And if you look here, you can see that this is the section X. That's 24. They started at A and went to X. And I don't see numbers here, but this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this box was X6 or X1. I'm not even sure anymore. And I put that in my record, which particular seedling was planted in X1. And this picture was taken in September. I had planted them out in May. So you can see that now they're bigger, and they look like little daylilies. Now this is the following June, and here they are, and you can see they're quite big now. And yes, this is a second seedling bed, because I did the same thing that year, and I had another 150 seedlings that had to be put somewhere. But here, this is a month after the one above, and you can see there's lots of bloom. In fact, about half of mine bloomed their first year out of the ground. Well, I don't know whether I should call those first year or second year. I had planted them the previous year from little pots, and now here they were out of the ground, and then half of them bloomed. And then the other half generally bloomed the following year. So here it is about 4 years later, and this is when I realized, okay, I'm out of control. I have to do something, because I discovered that I could not just trash them. I couldn't, I had no room to plant them all. I had no intention of selling them or giving them names or any of that kind of thing that the real hybridizers do. But I couldn't just throw them away. So I began to campaign. Everybody I know who has a garden has some of my babies growing there. In fact, regularly still, like this is about 6 years ago now, I get photos sometime in July from various friends who say, here are your babies in my backyard. So I get to visit them again. So basically I stopped doing it on such like producing 150. I know people who do thousands of seedlings every year. I mean, they are into this on a commercial basis. They register their best and they sell them. But this was just fun for me. I loved to go out every morning down to the back of the garden where this seedling bed was to see what was I seeing today. And it was such a treat when the first flower of any particular cross would open to see whether, is it red? And then I would look to see who the parents were. And it was fun. So now I'm going to show you some of my babies. And I actually got my book out and I checked. And during that time, I actually made 137 crosses, which doesn't sound like very much. 119 of those produced seeds. Some of the crosses didn't take. And of those seeds, 481 actually germinated. So Here's one, Raspberry Beret and Moonlit Masquerade. This is the kind of thing I love to see. Look at the variation, the similarities and the variation. These are siblings. This is what they're called. They all came out of the same seed pod. So I have to go fast. And I could talk about daylilies for 2 hours, but I have to go fast. I'm supposed to be finished. And here we have Fooled Me cross Moonlit Masquerade. Now here, they look all the same, but if you look closely, these eyes are different. The one down here in the corner is a thinner line, much thicker one here, but they're all yellow with a maroon eye. Here's another one I liked. These were all like very bright, but orange with red, red with orange, and very, very bright ones. They're all now in a friend's garden. I can visit those. And I actually brought a couple of these with me when I moved. This was Pumpkin Bandit and Pumpkin Pie Spice. And I really love these little dark ones with the sort of real orangey color. And this one, I loved this. I had a hard time yesterday picking which ones I was going to show. There were so many, and I have pictures of them all, of course, but I just love the like this sort of a pure orange with a yellow center, and this is purely pink, and this one over here is purely red. And I just thought very, very interesting when you compare them to the parents. And then this was a strange one. These all had this grainy look. Another friend has all of these. I called these the Pink Sisters, and managed to convince a friend to take those. So they're still together somewhere. And this is the last one. I had, and these seeds were given to me. I have iPod in my garden, and but I didn't have Crazy Ivan. But these had grown out of the ground just the year I moved. So they were unceremoniously dug up in June, and I brought them with me. And that year, only one of them bloomed, and this is what it was. Now it looks very much like the father, but you can see it has a gold throat and not, I should say father, the mother. It has a gold throat rather than green. And the other two didn't bloom that year. The next year, this one showed up, and it has a very green throat. And then the third year, I thought the third one was a dud, but finally it bloomed. And this is what it is. It's absolutely a beautiful one. So there is a handout available. I know I've talked too long, but anyway, if you look in the chat, you'll find it. And if you are on an iPad, you won't see it, but you can ask for it at that email address. And very quickly, this is why I love daylilies. When I was young, and there I am, we lived, this is old daylilies here, as you can see, and I decided, this is a veranda, and I decided it was a good idea to lie down on the railing of the veranda, which is about 10 or feet up or whatever, and I soon fell off into the daylilies, and I was saved. So I thought they saved my life. And that's it. Too long, I know, but anyway, I love daylilies.
Well, thank you, Kelly. We do have some questions for you. When you deadhead Stelladora, do you deadhead just the bloom or cut the stem down to the bottom to get a second flush?
When all the buds on the scape have finished, I cut it right down to the bottom. I think it would rebloom anyway, but I cut them down as on any daylily. As soon as all the buds are finished on the scape, I cut it off.
Okay. Does weather affect pollen collection and transfer? Is it best on a sunny, dry day, avoiding wet days?
Well, you will be luckier on a sunny, dry day. If it's hard rain, you will not probably be like, you still might get some to take, but it's in a day where you don't want to be out hybridizing, it's because it's raining anyway. So wait till tomorrow.
Okay. Now, you did mention tetraploids and diploids, and that they should be, pollen won't take from one to the other. How do I know what I have? Is there a place I can look this up?
Yes, if you have a registered cultivar, if you know the name of it, you can look it up on the database, and that's on the handout. And so you can tell there whether it's a tet or a dip. And apart from that, if you're not sure, generally tets tend to be sturdier, thicker, a little bit more robust. And the diploids, in my opinion, tend to be a little more willowy. The scapes will blow more in the wind. But if you're not sure, try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Okay. And are there any diseases or pests for daylilies?
Yes, but not really any to speak of in this climate. We are very fortunate. The worst one is daylily rust, and this is a problem in the American South. They have to be very concerned about it. But here, no, it doesn't overwinter here. Anyway, if you did import a daylily that had rust, it probably would not survive. The rust wouldn't survive the winter.
We've probably got time for one more question.
Okay, one last question. You mentioned the hybridizers do thousands of these. Can you give us an idea of how many seedlings they would plant and how many would eventually make it to registration?
Oh my gosh, like a very tiny percent. But when you, if you have one of the big hybridizers, they will be registering 20 to 25 a year. And when you think that they probably grew 20,000 the year that this one, these, you can see that it's a very small percentage. They're very selective. Most of their daylilies, I don't even know how they can look at them all. Most of them will get composted.
Kelly, that was so excellent. I've always loved daylilies, and you've shared so much valuable information about them. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience who tuned in today. Be sure to join us next week at the same time. We'll be talking about the bounty of harvesting from the balcony with Heather McDonald. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.